Welcome to the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. In each episode, we will discuss professionals serving the tech startup market and the various issues of importance to those companies. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. Now here's the host of From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market, Phil Crowley.
Welcome. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. We try to bring you leaders in the life sciences and technology who have perspectives to share that can be helpful. How to succeed, mistakes to avoid, issues you should be aware of, all with a view to demystify the process of getting your great ideas from the laboratory to the marketplace to enrich the lives of thousands or even millions of people. Today, I'm delighted to have as my guest Jennifer Hawkes Bland, who is the Chief Executive Officer of New York Bio. New York Bio is the leading advocate for the life sciences in the state of New York. And I'll point out that New York State lays claim in the life sciences to a number of notables, one of which is having the world's largest concentration of academic medical centers. So it's a real center of innovation where things are happening. And stay tuned for the end of our discussion, because I'll ask Jennifer to give you a couple of pointers to help you increase your understanding of innovation in this area, which can lead to helping you be more successful in your innovations and your journey as an entrepreneur. Jennifer, welcome.
Thanks, Phil. I'm glad to join you today. Thanks for having me.
Well, glad to have you here. Please tell us a little bit about your background and the pathway that brought you to New York Bio.
Yeah, of course. It is interesting. I love talking to people about their backgrounds and sort of how they arrived, right, at whatever they're doing today. And I find that they are rarely linear. In fact, I think a circuitous sort of path is probably the most common path, and mine is no different. So as you know, but some people don't, I am a recovering litigator. So I worked on Capitol Hill early in my career, then went to law school. And so that was actually it was a very good thing to take a few years before I went to law school, because I learned the value of paying rent and footing my own bills, as it were, before diving back into school. And when I was in private practice, I did primarily pharmaceutical products defense litigation. So I was on a junior lawyer defending companies and product liability claims. And it was interesting. We moved back to DC, sort of second tour, if you will, in DC. And that's where I got into advocacy. And I switched, instead of a jury that I was speaking to, I was speaking to members of Congress and members of state legislatures, and really delving into industry issues, primarily for pharma and over-the-counter issues. So my advocacy skills were still being honed. They were just in a different way. And so that's actually how I got into ultimately the path that led me to New York Bio, which was I worked at GlaxoSmithKline for a while, and then worked for Schering-Plough for a very brief period before it merged with Merck, where I was all in for almost a decade in doing both federal and state government affairs. So all in the advocacy space. And then got recruited to join New York Bio to run it about 7 years ago. As hard as it seems to believe that it's been 7 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about New York Bio. It's one of the state organizations that's coordinated with BIO, the International Biotechnology Innovation Organization. But what's your particular style and particular focus for New York Bio?
Yeah, of course. Yes. We do have, I think maybe there are 49 state biotech association affiliates now that work with Bio, which is based in Washington, D.C., and we work closely with them on advocacy issues as well as our purchasing programs. And so our goal at New York Bio is to really take advantage of things that are specifically New York or that the region offers in order to support the growth of life science companies in New York. Now, I work very well with my counterparts all along the region, and we tend to go to each other's events and we show up for each other, which is fantastic. And I really do think it's hard to think about New York life sciences without also talking about the pharma that exists, particularly in New Jersey, right? And then as well as, Connecticut and up to Boston. So you have this real strong Northeast corridor of life science companies. And we're really, we've just really seen the growth take off. Now, New York Bio, because we serve as a convener and an advocate, we spend a lot of our time hosting events, connecting companies with opportunities, as well as advocating in Washington, D.C. and in Albany, in our case, right, at our state capital, to talk about issues that are important to fostering a strong life science economy in the state of New York.
What are some of the most exciting areas that you're seeing in the life sciences generally and that excite you about the prospects and the potential for life sciences?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many, so I'll pick a couple. New York is interesting because, as you mentioned, I would even go a step further in your characterization of our academic medical institutions and say we have, the best collection of world-class medical centers in the country, right? Everyone has their own opinion. I get to have mine. And so what we have seen as far as the ecosystem growing, really across the state, right? Whether it's at Stony Brook, Cold Spring Harbor out right on Long Island, to MSK, Columbia, Rockefeller, right? NYU here in the city, to Roswell Park, University of Buffalo, University of Rochester Medical Center, and the Empire Discovery Institute, that those three institutions, so University of Buffalo, Roswell Park Cancer Center, as well as the University of Rochester, they spun out a discovery center, which will ultimately help commercialize IP and discoveries that come out of those three institutions. So what we're seeing is a real growth in early stage life sciences from our academic institutions. And I think it's similar, but I think the concentration of early stage companies that we have in New York is really what sets us apart, and where they come from some of the other cluster areas right across the country.
Well, I think that one of the great distinguishing things about New York Bio is the opportunity to get people to connect, because it's in collaboration that sometimes that spark of innovation occurs. And although there are limits to that, so that people can protect their own intellectual property, convening opportunities like you do, like New York Bio does, in order to get people together to talk to investors, to talk to academicians, to talk to people who are looking to form companies, can be incredibly beneficial. What are some of the opportunities and events that New York Bio sponsors to help its members learn about new innovations, connect with people who can help them take their innovations to the next level, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. It's a great one. And, it's interesting because where we sit, right, as a convener of the ecosystem, we also want to make sure we're offering programs, events, opportunities that meet our members where they are. And because our members are made, and I guess I should have said this earlier, so our members, right, are made up of very early stage companies, mid, late stage pharma, right? So sort of from the 2-person spin out out of academia who probably still has their academic appointment and is doing this right on the side as they de-risk and try to prove their concept, to very large multinational, international, companies, academic medical centers, patient advocacy organizations, and then what I affectionately call the businesses that make the business of life science work. And that is law firms like yours that help their clients, navigate, accounting firms, all of the companies that really support the ultimate R&D work that ends up with patient treatments, so that's the who New York Bio is. And we do a series of, we have a fellows program, which is for early stage companies that have raised less than 7.5 million. So very early stage. And it provides an on-ramp to full membership. And what we also do as programming, which I love, is our mini pitch days. And at some point, we're going to come up with some sort of catchy name other than mini pitch, but I haven't gotten there yet. So we're sticking with it. And basically, this is a iterative learning, helpful process for an early stage founder to work and present their deck to a series of judges. Before they do that, though, and an audience, before they do that, we pair them with a mentor, and they're able to have an online conversation and work through some of the hiccups that come with pitching their deck to investors. So it really is a supportive, iterative process for these early stage companies. We take that, so that's one end, to the other end of the spectrum. And once a year, we partner with the New York Stock Exchange, and we have, these are Series A plus companies, and they present to an investor finance audience at the New York Stock Exchange. And that's in December. And so that's your other end of the spectrum. These are companies that have raised significant amounts of capital. They're either in the process of raising or they're getting ready for a crossover. And basically they are, this is an opportunity for them in a longer format pitch to be able to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've found very challenging, particularly for my younger clients, younger in terms of their development of their ideas, is understanding the focus that they need to have in the pitch deck. I have a methodology that I try to help them understand that I call the MSABC method, MSABC. And although the technologists love to dive deeply into the weeds of the technology, if they start there, they really risk losing their audience. And where they really need to start is with the M, which is, what is the market? How big is the market? How many dollars are being spent in the United States and worldwide on this particular
market? Yep.
Exactly. And what is the market not providing? And hopefully you can identify that, because then you talk to the stakeholders, and those include not only the patients, but also the insurers, the people who are paying for this.
Yeah.
And thinking about the incentives for them. And then the A, B, and C are, A is, well, what is your approach at like the 30,000 foot level, not to get too detailed. B, what are the benefits? You identified in your market analysis what's not being provided. Presumably it's what your benefits are. And then very importantly, C, who's the competition? And sometimes the competition is just not doing anything. It's inertia, the natural reticence of the medical establishment to move on to new things. I always remember the old saw for doctors, which is, be not the first to adopt the new therapy or the last to abandon the old. And sometimes that can really get in the way of progress.
Yes. Well, and a first mover, has advantages, but you also have to hack your path, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that may not, and because no one's tamped down, the path before you, it may be more difficult. But there are patients out there, I guarantee, that are waiting for whatever that product or therapeutic or diagnostic it is that you're working on. And that's the thing I think that we can't lose sight of.
That's right. And particularly the benefit to patients. And I want to get into in a bit your view of some of the therapies that New York bio companies are working on that really have substantial benefits to patients. But I'd just like to take a minute now to introduce our viewers and listeners to Crowley Law. We are a boutique law firm of very experienced lawyers who are passionate about helping innovators in the life sciences and other technologies avoid being taken advantage of as they develop their ideas and bring them to the market. I'm a former research physicist. You described yourself as a recovering litigator. I guess I'm a recovering physicist. I used to do my work in superconductivity, and I know how difficult and demanding the work is of creating new knowledge. And then as a corporate lawyer, I and my team of lawyers understand how difficult it is to take that new knowledge from the laboratory bench to the patient's bedside or to the marketplace and create products and services that improve the lives of thousands or millions of people. And I've seen many cases where the innovators, due to a lack of knowledge about the process, wind up losing much of the value that they've worked so long and hard to develop. And we all think that that's unfair, and we work to protect our clients from that. We've got a website, crowleylawllc.com, where we have a library of materials. And as I speak, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary of Crowley Law. And as part of the celebration, I've written a book. It will be available on Amazon. Please look for it. It's called Avoid Startup Failure. Learn the top 10 causes of failure for technology startups and how to turn them to your advantage. So I hope you'll take a look at that. Look for the book. Take a look at our website. We have a library of free resources that are focused on the needs of innovative companies at every stage in their development, from startup to a company ready to make its first initial public offering. And just remember that we are here to help. Now to get back to Jennifer. Jennifer,
I'm amazed that you've written a book. I love that, and I love that it sounds like, I look forward to reading it. It sounds like it's really broken down into sort of bite-sized, right, pieces of information that will really be helpful to founders.
Well, I've written it in part because humans are programmed to enjoy stories. I have a story of an intrepid, likable innovator who came from a humble background, worked hard to develop his training, went to graduate school, and had some adventures. And let's just say that they didn't work out quite as he planned. And there are learnings from that, and we go into explaining that after the story. And it's based on some stories that I have seen and incidents that I've seen play themselves out. It's one of the reasons why we're so focused on protecting innovators. But you've got a lot of stories to tell from some of the members of New York Bio and some of the things that have been done. Can you give us some examples of some of the innovations that New York Bio members have been involved in that really focus on improving the lives of patients? Because we hear a lot about medical research, and we hear complaints about research not really providing benefits to patients. But in the life sciences, here we're talking about innovations that have the potential to relieve suffering, cure diseases, maybe even save lives. What examples do you have of that?
Yeah, we clearly have with nearly 300 members, we have a lot of examples that I can use. And I think the most instructive thing is if you look at New York bio member companies from, the very largest, pharma companies and to the very smallest, and realize how some of those interact. A very good example that we saw announced during the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference week in January was the purchase of Intracellular by Johnson & Johnson. And it's obviously that deal hasn't closed, but those are two New York bio members. Intracellular was founded in New York City by Dr. Sharon Mates, and just has really focused on CNS and bringing therapeutics to patients in the CNS and schizophrenia space. And like that is a really good example of a very homegrown, successful, patient-forward company that, and I think especially when you're talking with entrepreneurs about sort of what happens, right, long term and how things play out, right? There are, you have several options, but there is the build it, take it public, continue to grow into the next, Pfizer, J&J, Merck, or, but that's a long road, right? These companies have been around, over 100 years in some cases. And then acquisition, right, is a really important part of how the ecosystem functions. And so I'm really excited when I see deals like that getting done, which will be to the benefit of patients, right? And then you have other successful stories like Regeneron, right? Also founded, right, in New York, is in Westchester, which is where that's where I live, right, just north of Manhattan. And it's an amazing story of yet another patient-focused, forward company doing I would say the vast majority of their research, right, in-house here in New York, and reaching patients where they're needed. So it's been really exciting to see those, and we could talk for hours, and I could give you hours of examples of New York companies growing and making a difference in the lives of patients. And one thing that I think it doesn't get talked about that often, but New York City and in the region is one of the most diverse in the world, because we have so many people that live here, that live in New York from other areas, right, of the world. And it also means that this region is a really important piece of our clinical trials network and our clinical trial work that is done, because we do have access in a relatively small geographic area to patients with characteristics, because different characteristics, because they come from all over the world.
I see. That's been an important topic in terms of clinical trial diversity of the patient population. What have you seen in the development of protocols to try to get people from different racial and ethnic groups involved in clinical trials, so that there's some validation of therapeutic effect over people who have well-known different genealogies?
Yeah, we've seen a significant effort in New York because of the population to be able to run clinical trials here. And granted, like, you have to work with, obviously, both with trial design as well as, right, an investigator to be able, and often they are a part of an academic medical center. And so, as we said earlier, we have world-class academic medical institutions that do a lot of research as part of their remit. And so we've also been involved in conversations about reducing barriers, because I also think that there is this idea that a barrier in a very sparsely populated state, for example, is distance, right? Distance to a medical center. So then we've looked at, right, decentralized clinical trials and what sort of technological advances are available to help, right, with clinical trial adherence and clinical trial participation. But even in New York, if you live on, let's say, Staten Island, if you have to get to Harlem for a medical appointment, it it is not the easiest journey, right? Even though the distance itself isn't 50 miles, the journey can be challenging. And so we face some of those same barriers, even within the New York metropolitan region, that we have in other parts of the country. They're just present differently.
Well, it's interesting to see the advancements in electronic communications and also the advancements within the medical community in the use of electronic medical records to provide a more facile method of transferring information, and also transferring information on the patient, and then sort of standardizing medical records for the purposes of clinical trials so that people can enter information directly into a database rather than having to use the old paper and pencil method of putting information in, and then make it easier in order to audit that information and make sure it's been put in correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Like all of these, and I do think, like, if we can call out a bright spot, right, from our COVID experience, which was what, like 5 years ago today-ish, right, that sort of everything kind of started shutting down. I think that this adoption of the digital tools that you just mentioned was certainly accelerated and became obviously more acceptable for providers and payers to cover the cost, right, of those digital interventions or pieces of the healthcare spectrum.
Well, I don't think we'd have a complete discussion unless I mentioned, and we're talking now March 13th, 2025, about the potential impact of changes at the National Institutes of Health in its grant making and grant administration process. And, what impact have you seen to date on the virtual shutdown of as I see it, the review process at the National Institutes of Health, which has been one of the primary funders of basic medical research in the United States?
Yeah, from a New York Bio perspective, and I put out a statement, right, as all of this is starting to come out a few weeks ago, but my position is New York Bio is going to continue to do exactly what we've done in the past. We just talk about the importance of NIH funding, talk about the importance of basic research funding. We share that information with our New York delegation in Washington so that they understand when it comes to what they control, right, as members of Congress through the appropriations and the authorization process. The Small Business Innovation Research, SBIR grant program is up for reauthorization this year. And so I think that we're going to continue to talk about the real importance. New York is only second behind California for NIH funding. So it has a real, a real potential impact, right, as those changes are worked through at the federal level. And so, so we're going to continue to talk about how important it is and the good work that our companies do with those funds, right, that they receive from NIH to encourage Congress and the administration to both recognize and continue, right, to spend money on the basic research that they have been.
And Jennifer, what one or two tips could you give to aspiring life sciences innovators to help them along their pathway of entrepreneurship and innovation in terms of helping them sort of optimize their chances for success?
Yes. Well, if you force me to narrow it to two, I'll give you two. Lightning round here. So one is, I'm going to piggyback on what I just said. So number one is, if you have the opportunity to talk to your members of Congress, members of the state legislature, your elected representatives, to take that opportunity. I mean, we provide numerous opportunities for our member companies to interact with these, with the elected officials throughout the year. I'll be in Washington at the beginning of April with member companies. We'll be on the Hill. In February, we were in Albany talking to elected officials, our state elected officials. I encourage you to take advantage of that. Don't think you're not ready, because every time you have the opportunity to talk about the work that you're doing on behalf of patients, that is a good opportunity that you shouldn't pass up to talk to elected officials so that they understand the importance of what we're doing. And then the second thing is taking it back locally, wherever you are. If there is a life science organization similar to New York Bio or others, take advantage of that networking opportunity. There is real value to be had from getting to know your peers, the others in the industry. We all could go home and put up our feet, but occasionally take advantage of those opportunities to network and get to know other people. Those dividends will pay out from years to come. Phil, you and I met when both of us were in our previous roles in previous organizations. And those benefits are continuing today because we get to have conversations like this. So I would say 100% take advantage of that.
Super. And if viewers would like to learn more about New York Bio, how can they do that?
Yeah, so our website it's spelled out NEWYORKBIO, so newyorkbio.org. And you find us on LinkedIn too, as well. And then I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Super. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your perspectives. And I hope that our viewers and listeners have benefited from this. If you have, please subscribe to our podcast, tune in, take a look at our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com, and our library of resources. And just remember that we are here to help you.
Thank you so much.
You've been tuning into the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. If you found this information helpful, please subscribe, like, leave a positive review, and share with others.